The fifth phylum that we study, as I told you, we are going to study few more worms. Now we have roundworms, the phylum Nematoda. It has two more names, you need not to confused with that. First one that we often use is Aschelminths, because I told you we are going to talk about worms. So helminths are having two phylums. One is phylum Platyhelminths and other is Aschelminths, or otherwise known as Nemathelminths. Okay, and this Nemathelminths is little bit tedious in speaking. So we have Nematoda, and all the worms belonging to this phylum are known as nematodes. Now what we have over here is, if we see the body of the worm, as you can see over here, it is somewhat round. It is not dorso-ventrally flattened as we had in the case of Platyhelminths, and these are commonly known as roundworms. Okay, first thing. So we are dealing with roundworms now. Earlier we were dealing with flatworms, now we are going to deal with roundworms. Same way, they are going to be mostly parasitic. Parasitic on plants, parasitic on animals. The Platyhelminths were more parasitic on animals. These could be parasitic on plants as well. And they are microscopic. Most of them are microscopic. We have almost 13,000 species in Platyhelminths and almost 15,000 species of nematodes. But one thing I need to tell you, that these are probably the most abundant animals on earth. Abundant. This is not to be confused with the diversity term that I used with arthropods. When I said that out of 10, 7 would be those arthropods, I am saying abundant. Like if you take a lump of soil in your hand, you would have so many nematodes inside it. So you can make it out the abundance of these organisms which are going to be present. They are probably the most abundant because they are microscopic and present in lots of number. This has nothing to do with the species, because if comparatively we see the species of other phylums, they are quite less. Around 15,000 is a quite lesser number for species of a phylum. But coming back, we have roundworms which we have to study. They could be free living, they could be aquatic, they could be parasitic, both in plants and animals. We have few examples over here. If you can remember the names by heart, it is good. There is Rhabditis, that is free living, Dracuculus, that is also free living, Ascaris, the one which is found in the gut of small children. It is often said that there are spots on the face and there must be worms in the gut of that particular children. It is often said. So that worm is nothing else but this Ascaris, and whenever we study nematodes, we study Ascaris in detail, because it is the Ascaris to whomsoever, whatever reference is being made, it is towards this Ascaris only, because we take this as the best example for studying the characteristic feature of nematodes. Then there is Entrobius, basically. Then we have Trichuris and Loa Loa. This Loa Loa infects the eyes. You might have heard a famous song, Mr. Loa Loa. It refers to this particular nematode only. Now we have few characteristics, out of which we are going to concentrate on coelom, and we are going to see that how the coelom has an important role with other systems of the body. The organism is bilaterally symmetrical. That means, as I told you, from Platyhelminths onwards, we are going to have bilaterally symmetrical animals. And bilaterally symmetrical means there would be one plane throughout the body that would be giving two mirror images. Now, it is triploblastic. The earlier one was triploblastic. How can this one be triploblastic? Because we have arranged the phylums according to the complexity that they have. Okay, so the organisms are triploblastic. When they are triploblastic, they are going to have the three layers. This is becoming quite repetitive, and you should keep in mind that now whatever phylum we are going to study, it would be triploblastic. Over here the coelom comes, but it is pseudocoelom. It is not complete coelom, not proper coelom that is present in this case. Now let us see what is pseudocoelomate. What is the cross section of a pseudocoelomate organism basically like? You see the outermost layer, that is ectoderm. Then we have the gut lining, that would be endoderm. There is a false cavity known as pseudocele, which has mesodermal organs, because ectoderm and mesoderm are together. This false cavity is the pseudocoelom, and this is derived from blastocele of the embryonic stage. This is what the organism looks like. Now you see, because we are moving further, this is going to show proper organ system grade of organization. These phylums, this phylum's organisms or animals would have organ system grade. That means they are going to have a definitive digestive system, a definite excretory system, a definite nervous system, though their systems would not be that much advanced, but yes, they are going to be present. Now we are going to study the general structure of Ascaris over here, and from these diagram, this basic diagram and these labelings, we are going to see the general characteristics, that is organ system, how it is present. See, over here we have tube within tube body plan. Now recall what was there in phylum Platyhelminths. In Platyhelminths there was incomplete alimentary canal. This is tube within tube, and with this we start with higher organisms, that is the alimentary canal is going to be complete with an opening known as mouth and an ending known as anus. This is what a classic example of non-chordate looks like. This is how we show a non-chordate, and this is tube within tube plan. You see, this is the outer tube and this is the inner tube. That is why we are having proper coelom that is coming into the scene, and though it is pseudocoelom, but it is present. Now we talk about the digestive system. Now one thing you have to keep in mind, because of a false cavity in between, that is false, that is not completely coelom filled with coelomic fluid, it is a false cavity. There are outer muscles of the organism, they are lined by cuticle as you can see, and there are inner muscles of the gut. Now there being a cavity, these muscles, they move independently. They are not dependent on each other for the movement. The muscles which are present in the cuticle, near the cuticle, and the muscles which line the gut, they are moving independently. Now what lies in the digestive system? There is a mouth, there is a pharynx, there is intestine, and there is an anal opening. So this is what lies inside the digestive system. Now this mouth can have teeth, these retracted piercing devices. If we have to talk them in a common language, we can call them teeth, these teeth, and those which are parasitic forms, they have a muscular pharynx. These teeth are responsible for piercing the tissue of whatever organism or whatever food is going to be consumed, and this particular pharynx is developed in advanced muscular, highly muscular it is, in case the nematode is parasitic, so that it can pierce the host cells and take nutrition whatever is required from there. And then we have the intestine where the absorption would take place. There is a small, not small I would say, there is a primitive sort of reproductive system that is present. There is an excretory pore which lies, and there is a nerve ring. Talking about the nerve ring, this nervous system would be same as in the case of Platyhelminths, not much advanced, but it will have a brain ganglion from where the nerve cords, which are ventral because they are non-chordates. The ventral nerve cord that is having two nerve cords lying parallel to each other would extend, and we will have a nervous system. There is an excretory tube which is having excretory pore from which the excretion is given out, the nitrogenous waste of the body is given out. There is sexual dimorphism. As we are seeing over here, we have an ovary. So this is a female roundworm. Now when we have sexual dimorphism, we can distinguish from the external morphology. This is dimorphism, morphology 2. So there are two different morphologies that would be present, and what would be the basis of that morphology differentiation? It would be the sexual characteristics. Now if the male is having certain characteristics, female is going to have different characteristics which would make them look different. That is what is sexual dimorphism. Now in the case of roundworms, we see sexual dimorphism where the male is smaller in size and female is larger in size. Okay, that is what sexual dimorphism in roundworms mean, and because there is is sexual dimorphism, so the sexes would be separate. There is sexual reproduction that takes place. There are gametes which are formed, as you can see over here. They do not have to resort to asexual reproduction. It's better that they go for sexual reproduction. They have multiple hosts. They have developed that, those who are parasitic, they have developed the life cycle in such a way that they have multiple hosts and they can survive in a better way. There is a secondary host, there is a primary host, and there is indirect development. Indirect development, that means there are going to be present certain larval stages through which the organism would go and develop into an adult. So, we are going to talk about few examples. Now, when we talk about their examples, you are going to see that they are again very notorious. How they are notorious? Because you have heard about elephantiasis, that is also caused by a roundworm. You would study about a few plant diseases that are important for biotechnology, that is also because of a nematode. So, the first one is Ascaris, that is, often we talk about the worm that is present in the stomach, not stomach exactly, no worm can survive in stomach because it is having acidic pH to such a level that only acidophiles can survive over here. Now, I hope you remember what acidophiles were. Now, then it survives in the small intestine where they can get ready-made food basically. This Ascaris is present in the intestine of younger children. Oftenly, you would go and see some child who is not that healthy, he or she, it would often be referred by an elderly person that they are having some sort of worms in their intestine. So, those worms, they are Ascaris, and Ascaris is the typical example of roundworms. Second is Wuchereria bancrofti. It's better you remember the generic name only, not the specific. This Wuchereria is responsible for elephantiasis. Have you ever seen that people have their legs grown into such a huge size that they resemble to that of an elephant? That condition is caused by this worm, that is also known as filarial worm. Okay. Then we have Encyclostoma, that is known as hookworm. Then we have Enterobius, that is known as pinworm, and this is also seen in younger children when they eat lots and lots of sugar. It is believed that the Enterobius is giving them problem. Then we have Rhabditis, that is a free living nematode. Now, above these 5 examples are enough. What you have to remember is that different types of larvae would be present for individual. This is filarial worm, so it is easy to remember that Wuchereria's larva is known as filariform. Okay. There is rhabditiform larva as well. So, these 2 larval forms, if you can remember, it is good. If you cannot remember, it's okay, but you have to remember that they do have many hosts and they do have indirect development, that is the larval forms would be present. I guess this is enough for understanding the roundworms, and you can now very easily distinguish them from the platyhelminths, why they have a different phylum. Next, the next phylum that we study is also having the typical example of a worm, but it is going to be different from these 2 helminths. That is why the phylum that we study next would not be helminths. So, we are done with the helminths, the 2 phylums, platy and nemathelminths. I hope it is clear to you now what these worms have, what implications they have in our lives, and even if you keep that part aside, what you have to remember is what are their general characteristics which enable them to be a part of this particular phylum of animal kingdom.